This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into a topic that, well, it touches every single one of us every night, sleep. But we're not just going over the basics you probably already know. We're digging into some genuinely surprising updates and recent insights straight from the forefront of sleep science.
Exactly. And our source material today gives us pretty direct access to the latest thinking from someone who's really shaped how we all think about sleep, Matt Walker. The author of Why We Sleep, that huge bestseller.
Right, and that really popular TED Talk, Sleep is Your Superpower. So yeah, we've taken a close look at a specific recent discussion with him.
And our mission here in this deep dive is basically to pull out the most fascinating nuggets of knowledge for you.
Think of it like a shortcut, maybe? A shortcut to understanding the cutting edge of sleep research and why this non-negotiable biological thing we do is far, far more than just, closing your eyes for a few hours.
Yeah, much more.
Now, when we traditionally think about sleep, our focus is often inward, right? On how it affects our own brains or maybe our individual physical health down at the cell level or system level.
That's definitely been the main view for a long time, just focusing on the individual organism. But recent research is really broadening that picture. It's showing a much wider reach, especially into, complex human social stuff, interactions.
Okay, this is where it starts getting really interesting for me. A major area of new insight is how a lack of sleep doesn't just mess with you, but how it changes your social self and even influences the people around you.
Yeah, the evidence is piling up pretty fast on this.
Yeah.
A core finding is that not getting enough sleep fundamentally changes your social behavior. It makes individuals more asocial, kind of wanting to withdraw.
Right.
You just tend to feel lonelier.
And it's not just a feeling inside your own head. The really surprising part, I thought, was how other people perceive you. Like, even strangers who have no idea if you slept badly, they rate sleep-deprived people as less socially attractive, less like someone you'd want to talk to.
It's true. Something in our demeanor, our expression, it just shifts. And it goes even further than that. There's this idea termed a loneliness contagion.
A contagion? Wow.
Yeah, research shows that just interacting with someone who hasn't slept enough can actually make you, the person who is well rested, walk away feeling a bit more lonely yourself.
That's kind of unsettling, like loneliness is catching.
It almost seems that way, yeah. And there's another big social impact mentioned. Sleep loss seems to dramatically reduce our desire, our willingness to help other people.
Which, when you stop and think about it, that's huge.
It's fundamental. Helping behavior is core to human cooperation, to how we build communities, societies, It's this basic pro-social thing we rely on.
And there was that really specific, almost hard-to-believe example of this from the source, a study looking at nationwide charitable donations right after the clocks spring forward. Daylight savings time.
Oh, yeah, that one. When, 1.6 billion people globally lose that hour of sleep opportunity on one night.
Yeah.
The study saw something pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
A noticeable dip, like a significant 10% reduction in charitable giving across the U.S. on the Monday and Tuesday, right after losing that hour.
Just 60 minutes of lost sleep opportunity across the population, and nationwide generosity takes a measurable hit. That's striking.
It really is. It just highlights how quickly and profoundly, even seemingly small sleep losses can affect our basic social wiring, like our empathy or willingness to help others. It's not just about feeling tired. It's messing with who we are socially.
Yeah, our social fabric, really. Okay, so we get why 7 to 9 hours is the general advice, right? Based on all the biological stuff that goes wrong when you consistently dip below that.
Right.
But what about those people you hear about? The ones who claim, I only need 5 hours, I'm totally fine. Are they just bragging, or is there actually something to it?
Ah, yes, the genetic short sleepers. Well, the science does confirm they are real. But, and this is a big but, they are an incredibly, incredibly small fraction of people.
So rare.
Extremely rare. These are folks who genuinely seem to function normally, maybe even optimally, on around 5 hours of sleep, sometimes less. And crucially, they don't show the usual impairments in thinking or health markers, at least not in the studies so far.
And they've actually found specific genes linked to this, like that DEC2 gene mentioned.
Exactly. Genes like DEC2 have been identified in some of these individuals. What's kind of fascinating, almost philosophically, is that this shows nature has found a way to, like, compress the need for sleep, to ZIP file it, as the source put it.
Like a biological shortcut.
Kind of, yeah. It suggests there's a mechanism that can condense that 7-9 hour requirement down to maybe 5 or 6 without the usual negative fallout.
But the discussion also brought up a potential downside, right? A worry about what happens if we figure out how to do that artificially.
Precisely. The concern is, if we fully understand these mechanisms, society might push for, drugs or other tech to replicate it, leading to what was called an arms race of de-escalation.
Where everyone tries to sleep less and less.
Yeah, 6 hours becomes the new 8, then maybe 4. Constantly pushing to undercut our natural sleep need, even though it's not healthy for almost everyone.
And just to be super clear, how rare are we talking? Is there any chance I might be one?
Well, let's put it this way. Statistically, you are significantly more likely to be struck by lightning in your lifetime than you are to have that specific DEC2G mutation.
Okay, point taken. So probably not me.
Probably not. So while it's fascinating science, it's absolutely not an excuse for the vast majority of us to skimp on sleep. Your biological need is almost certainly still parked firmly in that 7 to 9 hour zone. Sorry.
No bubble bursting needed. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears. Let's move from the social stuff and those rare exceptions and talk about what's actually happening inside our brains while we sleep. Specifically, that really important cleaning process, the glymphatic system.
Right, the glymphatic system. It's essentially the brain's dedicated cleanup crew. You can think of it like the brain's version of the body's lymphatic system, which clears waste from everywhere else.
And its main job is?
Its primary function is to flush out metabolic junk, basically. Waste products that build up in the brain during the day. And that includes some key things linked to diseases like Alzheimer's, beta amyloid, and tau protein.
Yeah, I've heard it described in some pretty stark ways, almost like just being awake is causing low-level brain damage because you're constantly producing this waste.
That's one way to frame it, yeah. And sleep, then, is seen as your sort of sanitary salvation, or maybe more simply, the price you pay for being awake.
Okay.
And the long-held idea, the dominant view, has been that sleep is a preferential time for this system. It really ramps up, gets super active, to flush everything out while you're asleep.
Now, the source mentioned there's been a bit of controversy lately, a study that used different methods and seemed to challenge that idea, that maybe cleaning isn't highest during sleep.
Yeah, there was a study that came out suggesting that the fluid flow in the brain, which is what drives this cleaning, was actually highest when people were awake and lowest during deep sleep, which was, the complete opposite of what many previous studies had found.
So what happened there?
Well, significant questions and counterarguments were raised about that specific study's methods. Things like using non-standard imaging, artificially pumping fluid in rather than just measuring the natural flow, and maybe using sampling rates that were too slow to catch the really fast, crucial fluid pulses that are linked to those deep sleep brainwaves.
Okay, so factoring in those critiques, where does the expert view land now? Is sleep still the main cleaning time, or is it more up in the air?
The perspective shared was that, while maybe it's not quite as case closed as perhaps was stated very forcefully before, the overwhelming weight of evidence across different animals, different labs, different techniques still strongly points to sleep being a crucial and likely preferential time for brain cleansing.
So the bulk of the science still supports the original idea.
Pretty much. The system is dynamic, it's opportunistic. So sure, maybe some limited clearing happens during quiet rest when you're awake, kind of like your phone being in low battery mode.
Right.
But deep sleep is more like powering the phone off completely for that full, deep cleanse and system reboot. That seems to still be the best understanding.
And this cleaning, it's not just something happening entirely within the skull, isolated from the rest of the body, is it?
No, not at all. And this is where that idea of us being one single embodied organism really comes into play. It's vital.
How so?
Well, this brain cleaning process involves this really neat cardiorespiratory neurophysiological coupling. Basically, signals from your heart and lungs, your breathing rate, your pulse, they actually sync up with your brain waves, especially those big, slow waves during deep sleep.
Wow.
And that coordinated pulsing helps physically drive the fluid movement. It's almost like a gentle washing machine action, pushing and pulling the cerebrospinal fluid to draw out the waste.
That's incredible. So if you have problems with your heart, like, say, atrial fibrillation, that could actually mess with your brain's ability to clean itself during sleep.
Exactly right. The example given of atrial fibrillation leading to less effective lymphatic clearance really highlights this connection beautifully. You can't just study the brain in isolation. Sleep isn't just for the brain. It's a state of the entire system, with the heart and lungs playing a key role in brain health.
That connection is really powerful. Okay, so given how important this brain cleaning is, especially thinking long-term about things like Alzheimer's risk, what about sleep medications? Do they help this process or could they actually hinder it?
That's a super important question, and the insights here were quite eye-opening, maybe even a bit concerning regarding some of the older meds.
Okay.
We've seen this evolution, right? The source talked about Web 1.0 and 2.0 sleep drugs, think benzodiazepines, and then drugs like Ambien or Zolpidem. They mostly work by just broadly sedating the brain's cortex, often by messing with the GABA system.
So they knock you out.
Essentially, yes. They induce unconsciousness and it feels like sleep, but physiologically, it's not really naturalistic sleep.
And what did the studies find specifically about Ambien and this brain cleaning process?
This was a really surprising and, frankly, quite concerning finding. Ambien does increase the time you spend unconscious, and on standard sleep scoring, it looks like it increases deep sleep.
Okay, but
But when researchers used more advanced techniques to look at the actual brainwave activity, they found Ambien significantly disrupts the slowest, most powerful brainwaves, the very ones we think are critical for driving that lymphatic fluid flow we just talked about.
oh wow, so what was the result?
The result was a pretty dramatic 30–40% reduction in brain cleansing activity compared to natural sleep. So even though you're asleep longer, your brain isn't getting that vital cleaning done effectively. It could be what was called junk sleep from a cleansing standpoint.
Yikes. So you're unconscious, but maybe not getting the restorative benefits.
Exactly. Now compare that to the newer class of medications, the so-called Web 3.0 drugs. These are the DORAs, dual orexin receptor antagonists, things like Belsomra or Suvorexant.
And they work differently.
Fundamentally differently, yes. Instead of acting like a sledgehammer sedative, they target orexin, which is sometimes described as the brain's wakefulness volume knob.
Okay.
By blocking orexin, they essentially turn down the volume on being awake, which allows your brain's natural sleep systems to take over and generate much more physiological, naturalistic sleep. It's seen as a more targeted, elegant approach.
And the big question, how did these drugs affect brain cleansing?
This is where it gets really exciting, and it was basically the complete opposite of the Ambien finding. A study using one of these DORA drugs, Suvorexant, in older adults showed something remarkable.
Yeah.
It not only increased their sleep time and their time in deep sleep, but it also led to significantly greater clearance of beta amyloid and tau protein, those Alzheimer's markers measured in their bloodstream the next day.
Wow. So more sleep and better cleaning.
Exactly.
Huh.
It suggests this newer class might provide what's being called functional sleep. Sleep that doesn't just mean more time unconscious, but sleep that actually works for your brain, driving these crucial restorative processes like cleansing. It could potentially improve next-day function and maybe even protect long-term brain health.
That's potentially a huge deal. Like the first time a sleep medication might actually be delivering on both fronts, sleep duration and that functional health benefit.
It's a very promising development for sure.
So we often get hung up on the number of hours, right? Sleep quantity. But the discussion really seemed to emphasize that quantity isn't the whole story, maybe not even the most important part sometimes.
That's absolutely right. There's been a definite shift, a growing recognition that we need to prioritize sleep quality right alongside quantity, and the evidence really backs that up.
Why is quality considered so critical, sometimes even more predictive than just hours slept?
Well, some pretty large studies suggest that the quality of your sleep can be as predictive, sometimes even more predictive, of major health outcomes, like your risk of dying from any cause, or specifically from cardiovascular issues, metabolic problems, even certain cancers.
Okay, that's significant.
Yeah.
So how do we actually define or measure sleep quality? It feels a bit fuzzy.
A key objective measure is something called sleep efficiency. It's pretty simple, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the percentage of time you spend in bed that you're actually asleep.
Right.
The target is usually somewhere around 85–90% or higher. So you could spend, say, 10 hours in bed, which sounds great from a quantity perspective, but if you're tossing and turning, waking up a lot, maybe only actually sleeping for 8.5 of those hours, that's poor efficiency, poor quality sleep, despite the long time in bed.
Got it. So it's about consolidation, continuity, not just total time allocated.
Precisely. And there's another really crucial piece of the quality puzzle, beyond just efficiency, and that's regularity. How consistent are your sleep and wake times day after day, weekend included?
Why is regularity so important? Is it just about training your body so it's easier to fall asleep at the same time?
It's actually much more fundamental than just managing sleep pressure, though it helps with that too. Regularity is absolutely vital for anchoring your body's internal 24-hour clock, your circadian rhythm.
Okay.
You have these two main systems governing sleep. The sleep pressure system, that adenosine buildup that makes you feel sleepy the longer you're awake,
Right.
and the circadian system, which dictates the timing, the peaks and troughs of alertness and sleepiness
Yeah.
across the 24 hours. Ideally, they work together perfectly.
And regularity helps them sync up.
Exactly. When you give your brain consistent signals, light exposure at the same time, meals at regular times, and crucially consistent bedtimes and wake times, it helps lock those two systems together. And that alignment dramatically improves not just the timing, but also the overall quantity and quality of your sleep. They're really deeply interconnected.
That makes sense. Consistency is key. Which perhaps naturally leads us to talk about sleep tracking devices. They're everywhere now. Rings, watches, things under the mattress. Is tracking your sleep generally a good thing?
It's a really interesting area, and honestly, the answer seems to be a bit of a yes and no, or it depends.
Okay.
For people who are generally sleeping okay, I think tracking can be quite beneficial. Unlike, say, diet or exercise, where you might have a decent sense of how you're doing, sleep is notoriously tricky to judge accurately just based on how you feel.
Right. I have no idea how much REM sleep I got last night.
Exactly. You probably don't know your precise sleep efficiency or your deep sleep percentage without some kind of objective measurement.
So it gives you data, and that old saying, what gets measured gets managed. Does that apply here?
I think it definitely can.
Hmm.
Many people find the data useful. They see, oh, look, whenever I have that extra glass of wine in the evening, my deep sleep tanks, or eating really late seems to mess with my sleep efficiency. Seeing that objective data can be a powerful motivator to change those specific behaviors.
If someone's thinking about trying a tracker, is there a best one? What should they look for?
You know, the best tracker is probably the one you'll actually use consistently. The one with the least friction. The one you don't have to constantly remember to put on or charge.
Makes sense.
So, things embedded in your environment, like some mattress trackers, can be great for that reason. Zero friction. Among the wearables, the rings and wristbands, accuracy is getting better across the board. The source did mention Aura as currently having strong validation data among the ring form factors, comparing well against lab-based sleep studies.
Yes. You said yes and no. What's the potential downside, especially for people who might already be struggling with sleep?
Yes, absolutely. This is the crucial caveat. For some people, particularly those already anxious about their sleep, tracking can unfortunately backfire.
How so?
Focusing too intensely on the daily numbers, especially if those numbers aren't looking perfect, can create this negative feedback loop. It increases anxiety about sleep, which then makes sleep worse, which makes the numbers look worse. You see the cycle? There's even a term for it now. Orthosomnia. It's this obsession with achieving perfect sleep data according to your tracker, which paradoxically ends up causing or worsening insomnia symptoms. Now, maybe the media sometimes overhypes it, but it definitely affects a noticeable chunk of people who track.
So if you find yourself getting more stressed out because of the tracker, what should you do?
Well, the suggestions mentioned include a few options. One, just take a break from tracking altogether for a while. Remove that source of pressure.
Okay.
Two, consider looking into cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. It's the gold standard non-drug treatment that helps change unhelpful thoughts and behaviors around sleep. You might then be able to reintroduce tracking later in a healthier way.
Or maybe just change how you use the tracker.
Right, that's the third option.
Sure.
Keep wearing it if you find the long-term data useful, but maybe only check the summary once a week or so. Get the trends without the daily anxiety hit from focusing on every single night's score.
And it's really important to remember the tracker's data isn't the absolute truth or the only thing that matters, right?
Oh, absolutely. Critical point. These consumer trackers are getting better, but they're not the same as a proper lab sleep study. And more importantly, they're definitely not a substitute for how you actually feel. Subjective experience is key.
So if the app says you had great sleep, but you feel awful,
Trust how you feel, seriously. Your subjective sense of restoration, how functional you feel during the day, that's just as important, if not more so, than any readiness score or sleep stage percentage the device gives you. They're tools, not the definitive answer.
Okay, good perspective. Lastly, what about tech that goes beyond just tracking? Things like smart mattresses or pillows that actually try to change your sleep.
Yeah, this is the sleep augmentation space. It's pretty exciting. These devices, often smart mattresses, combine the tracking sensors with active interventions. They can monitor your sleep stages, heart rate, breathing, just like a wearable.
But then they do something with that data.
Exactly. A key area is temperature manipulation. We know core body temperature needs to drop to initiate and maintain sleep and rise to wake up.
Right.
It's a crucial. So these smart mattresses can actively cool or warm the sleep surface throughout the night, guided by your real-time sleep data. They can help you cool down faster to fall asleep, maintain that optimal cool temperature during deep sleep, and then gently warm you up towards morning to facilitate waking.
Like a personalized thermostat for your sleep cycle.
Pretty much. The source mentioned a staircase method where it intelligently adjusts minute by minute to find and lock onto your ideal sleep temperature profile. It's a really elegant way to potentially improve sleep quality. And they're exploring other things too, like maybe using positional data and acoustics to subtly adjust mattress firmness or elevation to help with snoring.
Fascinating. So lots going on beyond just counting sheep or hours. That was a really comprehensive look at some truly fascinating and, yeah, sometimes surprising updates in sleep science. We've covered sleep's unexpected reach into our social lives, even our generosity.
The reality of those very rare genetic short sleepers.
That intricate brain cleaning system, the glymphatics, and how it's linked to our heart and lungs.
How different sleep meds can either help or seriously hinder that cleaning.
The absolute vital importance of sleep quality and regularity, not just quantity.
And finally, the pros, and importantly, the cons of using sleep tracking tech.
So what's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean for you, listening?
I think it just powerfully reinforces that sleep isn't optional. It's not passive downtime or a luxury. It's a fundamental, non-negotiable biological necessity.
Yeah.
Essential not just for our own body and brain function day to day, but for our social connections, our long-term brain health, our overall mental and physical resilience. The science just keeps revealing deeper and deeper layers of its power and complexity.
So given how deeply connected our sleep is to, well, pretty much everything from cleaning out brain toxins to how we interact with each other, here's maybe a final thought for you to mull over. What's one small, genuinely doable change you might explore, maybe starting tonight or this week, to better prioritize the quality and the regularity of your own sleep?
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.